Good morning. My name is Dan Drawbaugh. I'm a native of Cumberland County and a volunteer here at the Cumberland County Historical Society. If you look at a list of 19th century inventors, you're not likely to come across the name Daniel Drawbaugh. But here in central Pennsylvania, in the second half of the 19th century, that name was pretty well known. Daniel was born in the little village of Eberly's Mills here in the county. He was the son of a local blacksmith, and he grew up mostly in Eberly's Mills. He had no more than a fifth grade education, but most of his education was gained in his father's blacksmith shop. There he learned to be a tinkerer and an improviser, and over the years became well known as one who could improve machinery and do repairs for many different items. He began with his inventing in the 1850s, and in the early 1960s, he became very interested in electricity and magnetism, and that led him to become interested in learning how to transmit the human voice over wires. As he progressed with his experimenting, he eventually became successful in an actual transmission of the voice in his warehouse, and many local people witnessed this success of his. As he progressed with his experiments with this invention, he and his usual investors for his inventions did not see the commercial value of this talking machine, and he had no investors who were willing to help him pay to apply for a patent. So in 1876, the well-known name Alexander Graham Bell was the first to apply for a patent for a telephone. Interestingly enough, Daniel's telephone was actually in operation prior to 1876, whereas Bell's telephone had not even been successful in operating at the time that he submitted his patent application. Well, as time progressed, Bell was able to attract investors, and these investors form a company called the American Bell Telephone Company. And the company began installing telephones around many of the major cities in the U.S. Well, a group of investors in the Midwest decided they were going to compete with the Bell Telephone Company, and they began buying up patent rights from other inventors who were experimenting with this idea of transmitting voice over wires. And one of their prime inventors that they were interested in getting the patent rights for were the Daniel Drawbaugh experiments. And so in the 1870s, they were able to purchase patent rights from Daniel for his version of the telephone, and they began installing competing telephone systems in these same cities where Bell systems were being installed. Well, the Bell Telephone Company vigorously protected their rights to the Bell telephone systems and immediately filed for an injunction in the federal district court to halt the installation of the People's Telephone Company systems. Well, this injunction went to court, and after several years of testimony on both sides, the court decided in favor of Bell and issued the final injunction to prevent the People's Telephone Company from installing their systems. Well, the People's Telephone Company then appealed this injunction decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. And after extensive argument in the Supreme Court on a vote by 4-3 ruled in favor of Bell Telephone Company, and thus the Bell Telephone Company became the primary installer of telephone systems around the country. Had that vote gone one vote differently, Central Pennsylvania could have been the birthplace of the telephone. Now, Daniel Drawbaugh was not just interested in telephones. He invented many, many things over his adult years, ranging anywhere from a machine to assemble barrel staves, through hydraulic rams, specialized faucet, a coin sorter, an electric generator, and even a folding tin lunchbox. Here in the museum, we have an interesting display and a showcase that shows a number of his patent models and actual item. This is his coin sorter, which was one of his very last patents. Up here are patent models of his pneumatic machines, electric generator, and some of the model telephone instruments that were used during the district court trial. Here's a photo of Daniel about the time of the injunction hearings in the federal court. Now, Daniel had a workshop in Eberly's Wills where he did most of his inventing. This is a copy. Daniel was very popular in the local newspapers because of his various inventions, and particularly his telephone invention. The newspapers called this the Old Curiosity Shop. It was a former clover mill located down along the Yellow Breeches Creek. Daniel spent almost all of his adult working hours working in this building, working on his various projects and building various items to support his patent applications. Daniel was awarded over his lifetime at least 70 patents. 35 of those were improvements to his telephone invention, but other patents were issued for many of those various items that I mentioned before, particularly these that are located here in the showcase. Daniel, as I said, lived most of his life in Eberly's Mills, with the exception of 1 year in Mechanicsburg, where his wife had insisted they move in hopes that she could keep him out of the workshop and have him at home. But Daniel wasn't willing to do that, and every day he would take the train from Mechanicsburg to Camp Hill and walk down to his workshop in Eberly's Mills. The other final years of his life, he lived on 17th Street in Camp Hill and had a little workshop around the corner from his house. In that workshop, one day in 1911, he was displaying his newest idea, a wireless burglar alarm for a number of newspaper reporters. While he was there, he had a stroke, and they carried him around the corner to his home, and there in 1911 he passed away. He was not a rich man, although he had numerous patents. Many of the patent rights were owned by his investors. And so at the time of his death, his estate was estimated at only $500. He and his wife had 10 children over their lifetime, most of which did not survive their parents. Daniel is buried in the St. John Cemetery next to Peace Church in Hamden Township. As I said, Daniel was well known to the newspapers. At the time that Marconi claimed to have transmitted voice over the ocean, the New York World newspaper telegraphed Daniel to ask whether he thought what Marconi had done was actually feasible. So that's how well known he was after the telephone case. So that's Daniel Drawbaugh, one of Cumberland County's famous personalities from the 19th century. Thank you for listening.